Week 2 is here, so let's run through a how-to guide for the Atlanta Falcons to beat the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football from the city of brotherly love. Now, before we look at step 1 for beating the Eagles, I want to remind everyone that here at Chat Sports, we are a competitive group, and we are racing the other Chat Sports channel, Eagles Now, to the next 1,000-yard or 1,000 milestone in subscribers. So we've got about 100 sub lead on them, racing to 25K while they're going to 83K. So if you have not subscribed to the channel yet and you want to beat the Eagles, hit that sub button down below. Now, let's talk about some of the weaknesses and the pressure points that the Falcons could squeeze on the Philadelphia Eagles to eke out what's probably going to be a very difficult road win on Monday night. First weakness I noticed for the Eagles when watching their game against the Packers in Brazil, spotty run defense. I'm not going to say the Eagles have a bad run defense. They've got a lot of really good players up front and a lot of talent and a lot of Georgia Bulldogs that you guys are very familiar with. But I think it's fair to say that it's a little bit spotty. Like, let's go back in time to week 1 in Sao Paulo when the Green Bay Packers offense had 163 yards on the ground, an average of 7.8 yards a carry. Josh Jacobs had over 80 yards in the second half alone. So while there are plenty of talented players on the Eagles front, 163 yards, that should be a number that pops out to the Falcons as, ooh, we may have identified an Achilles heel of this defense. When you look at the Eagles' just linebacker core here, there are some really good players. I'm a big fan of Nakobe Dean. I thought he played well against the Packers. Bryce Huff is MIA, so keep an eye on that. Josh Sweat is a good outside backer. And then you look at their defensive line. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. UGA fans know them all too well and know what they're capable of. So there are some really talented players up front for the Philadelphia Eagles, but that does not erase the fact they gave up 163 yards to Josh Jacobs and company, which means when you look at Bijan Robinson and what he was able to do in week 1, 23 touches altogether, 68 rushing yards, 43 receiving yards, over 100 all-purpose yards. There was a lot of good stuff from Bijan's tape. Now, a casual might look at 68 rushing yards and think, Bijan didn't have a great day. What they didn't look at was, for starters, he was going up against a loaded box every single time the Falcons broke the huddle. This is just shame on Zach Robinson, but they became so predictable. All of their runs came out of shotgun. Most of their passes came out of the pistol. So for the Steelers, it was pretty obvious when Bijan was getting the rock. So the fact that he was able to put up those numbers when the defense knew when he was getting the football, that's pretty impressive by itself. So hopefully Zach Robinson and company will not tip their pitches and let the Eagles know when it's a run versus a pass based on the formation. And then then Bijan Robinson is not going up against an 8-man box. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach himself, pointed out that when he fired up Bijan Robinson's tape today in a meeting, it reminded him of pulling clips of Saquon Barkley when preparing for the Giants. And Barkley, as we know, had an awesome debut for the Eagles, and in my opinion, is one of the best backs in football. So for Bijan, hopefully he can take advantage of a little bit of a shaky run defense for the Eagles. So let me know, will Bijan score a touchdown? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. I always want to hear from you guys in the comment section. It's great to have a two-way conversation, so I'm not just talking to a camera the whole time. So let me know down below. Second weakness I identified, blitzing Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't say struggle, but I go back and forth when it comes to evaluating Hurts as a quarterback in general. I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts stan, but there is definitely one weakness, and that is when he is blitzed and he gets uncomfortable, he makes poor decisions. And we're going to look at that in closer detail in just a second. But first, today's video was made possible thanks to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One thing I really like about Game Time is their all-in pricing option. Toggling this feature shows you the total upfront cost with no surprise fees at checkout. So download the Game Time app today to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHAT Sports for $20 off. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Now, let's take a look at Jalen Hurts last year when being blitzed. 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and relatively low completion percentage of 60.5. There are some quarterbacks that, as backwards as it might sound at the surface level, perform better against the blitz because they look at the blitz as an opportunity to get one-on-one matchups and take advantage of that. Jalen Hurts, on the other hand, I think when he gets blitzed, he starts to get flustered, and that's when mistakes are made, and that's when sacks are taken. So, who's blitzing him? Well, when you look at the linebackers, this is going to make up a majority of the meat and potatoes for the blitzing crew. Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, Nate Landman, those 3 linebackers in particular. And let's really highlight Caden Ellis, who, if you recall, 2 years ago, his last year with the Aints, he had 7 sacks. And then last year with the Falcons, he still showed that he's a great pass rusher despite kind of playing a traditional middle linebacker role. So Ellis, Landman, Anderson, those are 3 guys that really got to get after Jalen Hurts when getting called upon. So if you're looking for some players to maybe have a really big night, as long as Jimmy Lake and Raheem Morris dial up the pressure, which I think they should against Jalen Hurts, those 3 players got to bring their A game. I would say this is the time to go full remember the Titans. Like, I get goosebumps every single time I see the clip of we blitz all night. They don't gain another yard. That's got to be the mentality. That's got to be in the locker room before they take the field. We blitz every play. That's got to be the mantra. Third weakness for the Eagles, picking on some new DBs. The Eagles somewhat revamped their secondary, out with the old, in with the new a little bit. Their first and second round draft picks were on corners and DBs, Quinyon Mitchell and I'm blanking on his name, but Cooper DeJean. I'm about to say the white guy, so that pretty much eliminates every other corner. But when you look at the Eagles' DB snaps from week 1 of this year to all of last season, I mean, just look at some of the new faces on there. Last year being led by James Bradbury, he's on IR to open up the season. That opens the door for Quinyon Mitchell to get a larger role. Free safety Kevin Byard, he's not on the team anymore. C.J. Gardner-Johnson comes back to the Eagles. So you've got some new faces there. And what happens when you got new pieces and new players in the secondary? Miscommunications, right? You've got a safety in a corner that think the other guy has the guy, and ultimately that receiver gets wide open. So when you've got some new faces in the secondary, you got to attack those players, especially in the month of September. That's when these miscommunications happen. They're still getting worked out, right? They're still getting on the same page because so much of the NFL is nonverbal. Like, a quarterback walks up to the line of scrimmage, and him and his receiver, if they've been together for a long time, are just on the same wavelength of, hey, you've got a one-on-one matchup. Well, when we broke the huddle, your route was just a slant. But if you got one-on-one on the outside, you got to go deep. And that's why you see like Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, so many of these great quarterback wide receiver connections put up stupid numbers because they're on the same page. Well, the same goes for the defense, right? As the season progresses, as the offense breaks the huddle, depending on what kind of look they show the defense, well, the defense goes, hey, based on what we have lined up on this side, you know it's a safety you got to help over here more than the other half of the field. You got to play the field side versus the boundary side. So early on in the season, you can take advantage of DBs having these miscommunications. I would like to see Kirk Cousins attack those DBs. And speaking of Kirk Cousins, it is time to come through on Monday Night Football. I mean, this is not this one game is why you paid him $180 million, but you got Kirk Cousins to get back into national relevancy a little bit. The Falcons were one of 2 teams that did not play a single standalone game last season. That's got to change, and that does change with Kirk Cousins, and especially on Monday Night Football. with the whole country watching. Now, unfortunately, in his career, Cousins does not have a great performance on Monday night. He is 3-10 all time. He has shaken that inability to win on primetime. That joke and that run is over. But I do think it's somewhat worth acknowledging that, well, he doesn't have the greatest record and the greatest stats on Monday night or in primetime in general. I mean, think about who he's going up against on Monday night and in primetime. Like, the NFL creates these really tough, good matchups, so you're playing some really good competition. You don't get a lot of Kirk Cousins with the Vikings against like the winless Panthers on Monday Night Football where you kind of get an easy win. You tend to get the best opponent possible. So I do think that has to be factored into the equation a little bit, the strength of schedule for these primetime matchups. But still, Cousins, he just simply has to come through. Like, he's got to play much better than he did week 1. And the Falcons are very positive and are not blinking whatsoever when it comes to Kirk Cousins and his health and the offensive game plan going into week 2. But I'm blinking. Like, what we saw last week was a guy that was a statue in the pocket, zero, and I mean zero play action for a quarterback who led the NFL in play action in 2022. Now, I'm sure the Falcons are going to incorporate some more play action just to get the pressure off of them, but it shouldn't be to get the pressure off of them. It should be because that's what Kirk Cousins is. He's a play-action quarterback. That's one of his greatest skill sets. Use it. So predict the score for me. Falcons versus Eagles. Get in the chat right now before we get on out of here. Let me know who you got. And I also want to give a quick shout-out, Reed, to the Dirty Birds Club because we will be live for Monday Night Football doing a watch party. So if you're looking for a spot to watch the game, maybe you have DirecTV and you don't have access to ESPN, well, come hang out with us here. We're giving shout-outs to the Dirty Birds Club, Jose Santana, Ken Ballard, Trey 1222, Jason Lindino, Reese Atkins, Archangel, and Angry Liquid. If you want to get added to the Dirty Birds Club, $100 super chat during our watch party, and we'll toss your name on screen for the entire 2024 season.